Thank you very much, Lauren. Welcome to Countdown to Cooldown. I'm Dracos, joined, of course, by Ender and Ejim. Ejim, wild series.
NA third seed is better than Korean third seed. What a way to sum it up. That's
Who would have known?
That's a banger.
That's all. I mean, that's all you can ask for from Hooney, right?
Yeah.
He comes in nice and humble, as he sometimes, rarely, I will say, does. Like, gives his opponent a lot of credit. Says, hey, they're a good team. You know, 3-1 maybe, but it's not going to be a clean one. And then he just 3-0s them, makes it look effortless.
Look, I'm just saying, take that statement with a grain of salt here, too, because he also said that top lane Ezreal was better than top lane Fiora, which I personally have some gripes with, but, you know, his Ezreal looked pretty good today.
Unless you're Hooney. And then
Unless you're Hooney, I guess.
Ezreal top's balling out of control. Like, we're just better than Korea. Sick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, completing the sweep here for Clutch. Fantastic final game. Really styling. And it felt like just ramped up over the series, more and more progressively dominant. And that last one went on for a while. I think difficult for Clutch to end the game with the compositions they had, but just massive performance from start to finish.
It definitely felt that across the board, like, I think Clutch Gaming just came in with stronger players. Pretty much in every position, that's what this this series read to me like. Even though there were some questions with some of the players on the team, I felt like they all really showed up today. And I love that play around the Baron in particular, because usually I think Clutch can not be... They choose some fights really well and choose some very poorly. That was a situation where they choose it really, really well around the Baron area and all commit to the turn off the objective. I thought it was really, really clean from them.
And I think given how dominant the series was, like, that is one of the most important things. Looking at this team that can be super flashy, like, it's not uncommon to see Demonte, like, get ganked and then just sit there taunting his opponents and stuff like that. The fact that it was so dominant and so reliable, there was really never a time where they threw a Baron and they gave them back a significant gold lead. You can look at, like, little mistakes here and there, but given the style with which they actually ended it, I think this is looking super good for Clutch heading on further in the tournament.
Yeah, and huge shout out to the Clutch bottom lane. Of course, that last game, they just absolutely rolled there, Cody Sun and Vulcan, but I thought throughout the series, they played very, very solid League of Legends.
And historically, of course, if you were looking for a weak point on the map, you may have pointed fingers at the Clutch bottom side. Cody Sun is reliable, but he's not someone that many people would put up there with world-class AD carries. But now he's made groups and has a chance to prove any kind of notion just like that wrong if he can have some of these world star performances against the SKT bottom lane. While Faker's, I don't know, picking Fiora, trying to brag his way through the top lane matchup against, quote, the Con.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's interesting, too, because you actually, if you do try to compare Cody Sun to the other AD carries at the tournament, you look at his stats in the LCS regular season, he actually ranked highest for damage per minute difference among all bottom laners, and out of all the AD carries that are at Worlds, he is second in that number behind Uzi, as a matter of fact.
Damn,
Well, of course, that is over in the LCS. Like, his damage difference is absolutely insane.
Yeah. Yeah, it's popping off.
Mean, for sure. See how much that matters. Cross-regional stats, I feel like, are always difficult, but
It's hard to judge, right? But
for sure. But I like that he's smacking the competition down.
Yeah, the one thing that I do like about the Clutch bottom lane is, I mean, to introduce some just random irrelevant type, but like in terms of like early lane, mid lane, and like late lane, like the early stages pre-first buy, I think are actually pretty solid. Like him and Vulcan in terms of what they do entering the lane and how they play out the early matchups, I think they're actually super strong. But then it is like the hedge when Lyra's playing top side and they kind of get attacked and like things can fall down. But this is a super good series from them.
Absolutely was, and no surprise, I think, to anyone to see that the Oppo player of the series will be Cody Sun. Not only did he have a fantastic performance, but I think defied some expectations. Maybe not looking like the weak point in this series overall, especially looking at how the Royal bottom lane has performed, but really making a big difference, especially as Hooney was caught up on the top side of the map, being the difference maker when it counted most.
he's just right-clicking so fast. You can see in these pro view replays right here, even styling on tolerance a little bit.
Yes, the dash to the side so that Lyra gets hooked in is actually hilarious. Like, you don't want to hook in the Rex side, and then he just gets whacked in the noggin.
I just love these plays too because we've selected exclusively plays where he's already like hilariously fed.
Yeah, and those are the only ones that count.
It's just like we're making a YouTube montage, you know? We only pick the games where we're 6-1, we hide the scoreboard, and we're like, guys, I'm just insane. I don't know what to tell you. But
My champion just does twice as much damage as when you play it.
look, 23's, I didn't realize the numbers were that big. 23, 0, 12.
Big
Incredible.
numbers.
Yeah, huge numbers. But of course, that does mean that Damwon and Clutch are ready for the group stage, with the two last teams will be joining them tomorrow. Now, before we look at some of the teams coming up on the opposite side, I do want to catch up a bit on Damwon. Of course, you can see they made it through. It was 3-1, as we heard from Hooney. Not as good as his 3-0, but what was your actual impression in that series? What can we take away for Damwon?
Right, so looking at the series as a whole, I think Damwon was clearly the much better team. I think in terms of fundamentals and just individual play, I thought they were significantly stronger. stronger. What I was surprised by was to actually see Low-Key come in with the lane swap. We had seen it before, but not at all at Worlds. And it seems like with a very deliberate planned strategy, that was enough to actually break open the game again.
And I think for me, like, that wasn't really the surprising thing of the series, right? In terms of like Loki getting a win, it's like, yes, wow, that is great. But to come in with a very, like, they've practiced the lane swap. Damwon looked like in all sorts in that game. They kind of had possibly the worst situation to deal with a lane swap, like the Garen Yumi. There's the TF that's like hiding the weak side. But the rest of the series for me was like a little bit disappointing. And I think for a lot of fans back at home, like the fact that it took so long comparatively to what we saw the second half of the day wasn't as dominant as a lot of people were expecting.
I don't know, because you look at that game one, right? And even though they got put behind, I want to say like 4,000 gold very early on, Tristan has 3 items at 16 minutes on the other side. They actually got double Infernal. They were winning team fights, and by all accounts, I think should have won that game. They made a couple poor decisions in the late game, which you can definitely hold against them. But I think just the fact that they were able to fight back against that deficit speaks a lot to this team.
Definitely gives them a lot of credibility, but I do want to go back to what you're talking about, Ejin, which is a little bit of the question marks around not closing it out quite as dominant. Kind of getting back to the root of this, which is how much of this do you think is actually going to matter when it comes into group stage? How much of this do you take away? How much of this is like people going to say, oh, Damwon at 10%? What do you actually think means the most here?
And that's the thing for me, right? In terms of where this team is currently situated, like fresh, first time at Worlds, a young roster, I think that is exactly the kind of team, no matter how good you think they are, that does play towards the level of their opponents a great deal. Right? They're flashy, they play their own style, like you have the Klepto Bros, as Froskuren was giving them the name, right? But this is a team that against much better opponents, I think will play much better. Certainly you can't look at rough games and be like, oh, like this is just never going to happen again. Like, of course, it is something to look at, but certainly I think they will rise as they go through the rest of the tournament.
Interesting. Now, I'm curious to see what groups they end up in. Obviously, the choices are limited given that they are the 3rd Korean seed. Now, looking at our matches tomorrow, Hong Kong Attitude versus Isurus Gaming, Splice versus Unicorns of Love. I know immediately Splice versus Unicorns of Love is going to jump out to you, Ender, but I do want to start with Hong Kong Attitude Isurus. Is there anything that we think we've learned today, whether it be about the meta or some of the teams that these guys have played against, that we can kind of take into the series headed again tomorrow?
I think it's super difficult to talk about the first one. I think they're some of the hardest to read teams in the tournament in terms of expectations coming in and then performance during the group stage. They do like to play a little bit of a slower style, especially from Isurus, and has been like a weird one, right? This is like the first Quintop we saw. Isurus was like being saved by their AD carry in the back end of team fights versus Japan, who bowed out very early. So I think this is actually a super hard one to read.
Yeah, I think a common trend today that we've been talking about a lot is just fundamentals in League of Legends, and how Damwon we thought was the superior fundamental team. Clutch, again, I think talent-wise superior, but also fundamentals over Royal Youth. When I look at this first series, you'd assume the higher seed has the better fundamentals, but I don't necessarily think that's true. I think Isurus, from their group stage games, even in losses, I thought were much better, especially in mid-game, at just resource allocation and accumulating a lead without necessarily fighting, whereas I think Hong Kong or HKA are a team that is much more willing to like fight you for gold, for a lead through that way, but they don't necessarily choose the right fights. It's not about objectives or about numbers advantage. It's just, can we fight? We do fight.
And that's the thing that I put a reasonable amount of stock in terms of the reset from group stage to like best of 5 format. Of course, best of 5, like you have more time versus the same opponent, you get to put more preparation in, but where these teams were kind of being seen coming into the tournament, they have a second chance at like reinventing themselves. Like look at Clutch today. There were so many questions on day number 1, and then they come out in a super dominant 3-0. I think like I agree with you. HKA rather are a team that likes to fight for everything, whether it is like just for the sake of kills, whether it is for objectives. And Isurus are a smart team from what I've seen, right? Like this is a weird one to try and do any sort of predictions of what you're going to get, because it's like what we hoped the teams would look like.
Right.
But they do have like a chance to reinvent themselves.
And I'm curious to see how it unfolds if we see a shift from HKA in a best of 5. It's not a team that we know as much about coming into BO5. Domestically, obviously, like the clear 3rd seed. See if they can kind of live up to that expectation here up against a team like Isurus Gaming. But the final matchup, final point for this evening's cooldown, Splice versus Unicorns of Love. Ender, you started with, hey, it's all about fundamentals. This team's got who's got the better fundamentals?
Splice has the better fundamentals. Unicorns has some crazy stuff that they're ready to throw your way. I think.
Who are you talking about? He said that Heimerdinger, people pulling out crazy.
Exactly. I love it.
Heimer Fiddle in the same lane.
It's super interesting because Splyce is the predictable team in this matchup. Unicorns definitely is not, and I'm just super excited to see how these two teams clash. And for a particular role matchup, I think I'm always going to be looking at the jungle because those two players, Xerxes and Ananasik, represent their team so well. You have Xerxes, the cerebral guy that's going to track you and know exactly where you are. And you have Ananasik, who's never going to be where you think he's going to be. And that, I think, makes it for a really fun duel there.
Well, I mean, it's also just the storyline. You talk about the jungle matchup of Xerxes versus Ananasik. It's like, okay, Xerxes versus UOL. Like, how does this play out?
Chachi versus UOL.
Yeah, true.
It's all over the place.
Yeah, and I think you kind of hit on it in terms of UOL will be the weirder team, and best of 5 formats don't often favor weird stuff. We've seen, how deep does it go? How much stuff do you have to pull out? We've seen the Heimer Fiddlesticks. Can it go even further from that point?
And you have to remember, it's not all good weird stuff. We had the Vi jungle, too, which was a bit of a travesty.
But yeah, it was. But that's also just the tip of the iceberg. We see one game, and it is a big pick regionally for them, right? It has seen a lot of success. So and you can definitely tell, I come from a pro background because I'm what we see on stage, it's just the 1%.
I swear it's good, just like Echo Jungle.
Yeah, it could be great. It wasn't when we saw it, but who knows?
Let me tell you. Splyce, if there's any team here that's going to be ready to play against weird stuff, it's Splyce. Because they had to play against Reckless pulling out the Garen Yuumi bot lane. They have to scrim against G2 all the time. They even have Jack Troll in their league who still plays the Fiddlesticks support.
And look, to be fair, they did in spring try to lane swap. They put Kabe on a Vigar bottom. So they're ready.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to say they're ready, but they've experimented.
That was a long time ago.
They've dabbled in the dark arts of experimenting on the bottom side of the map. But we'll just have to see, I think, ultimately. European fans maybe not excited at first when you see this draw, knowing that Splyce or Unicorns will have only one can go through. But no matter what, it's going to be a pretty hype best of 5. And, of course, if you missed any of today's action, be sure to stick around for our rebroadcast starting at 8:30 p.m. CEST. That is 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. And that's going to be all from us here in Berlin. Of course, thank you so much for watching. We're going to be back tomorrow to decide the last 2 teams in the group stage. We'll see you then.
We've been in the gym. Yeah, we've been in the gym. Focused on the win. What you say, boy? Come again. Hey, please come again. I like we ain't poppin'. Hey, who gon' stop us now? Who gon' stop us now?
Garen spinning, but is he winning is the real question. Is so incredibly tanky in the front line, and Canyon jumps forward and dies as an afterthought. Celebrity's so big, another, but now DNK has to be dealt with. Beryl is got it from the Garen, and they've won the game. We could have another steal as Noggery, not even in the pit, but Canyon is going to be able to get that one locked down. Oh, the boot back,
there it is.
The 4-man Nara into the wall. Could this be Loki's team fight already to have gone down as Noggery gonna have to do it by himself? Brilliant stuff there from Noggery as Showmaker dives onto Celebrity there. And you can see Damwon, no one going down just like finally it's Nuclear that falls, but the health bars of Loki were all invested for one pesky Yasuo. The Nexus is gonna be the next one, and yep, we've stopped the backs. Our first team promoted into the world's group stage is Damwon Gaming.
We've been in the gym. Yeah, we've been in the gym. Focused on the win. What you say, boy? Come again. Hey, please come again.
Lyra on his way, Demonte going in for the fight. Clutch want this one closer. Already down to half HP, Seal flashing even closer. Gonna fall first, first blood to Demonte. It's Tanner time early on here. Seal getting chased away as well, that's 2. And that's already Demonte falling, and here comes the rest of the fight. Seal jumping in, takes 1. Looking for more, he has to get out of the back of the fight. And now Tolerant stepping forward with Pilot. It's all on this Ezreal, the play comes out, but the Cataclysm follows him. Pilot goes down, Cody takes the triple, and Tolerant goes gold and flashes away, but Cody is on the chase. Tolerant will not escape today. A quadra kill for the clutch AD carry. Pilot dives onto the backline, but immediately he is focused down.